Today's video is going to be about this jig that I designed for cutting half laps and cross laps in wood. Half laps and cross laps. Half and cross. All right, it'll work for either. It consists of a 1/4 inch bolt with a wing nut on it. One board with a slot where you can tighten up on the slot. An end cap which fits over this inch cap being 1.5 by 1.5 inches. These two boards being 3/4 by 1.5 inches. And that, all right. So this slot needs to be long enough to where the thing will close all the way tight to the end, and where it'll open up wide enough to fit your widest dado blade. I can't imagine an 1.5 inch dado blade, so it only needs to open about that far, but I made the slot extra long because I just did. And so your gauges that you use, the gauge blocks, this gauge block right here is cut and tuned. I cut a little bit thick and then sand it to fit a dado slot the same thickness as my dado head, which is, I got it set up for 1/2 inch. This shim fits the blade I usually have on there. If I just have a couple of small dados to cut, then I'll just use my standard, the blade I always have on there, which is a Freud LU80, LU83. It's a nice blade. So these slots, of course, fit right in here. And then you tighten, you push it up tight, snug, you tighten the screw, the wing nut, and it's set to go. Just drop the plug. So it takes 2 plugs. I keep the plug I'm not using in the bag, and I hang it on the wall. And when I'm finished, I take the whole setup and hang it on the wall. I've got a nail over there, and I've got a hole drilled in this so I can hang it on the wall. Now, the first thing you have to do is set the dado block on the saw on the table against the fence. Put a clamp on it, and make sure you get that clamp good and tight. I have had it slip on me in the past, which is not a good thing. I've had the clamp come loose and ruin a dado. So now you can see that'll still move. Now, the first thing we have to do is establish the depth of our dado. Now, how you do that is you eyeball the blade to where it is about half the thickness of the, well, actually a little less than half the thickness. What am I running into? I'll be a sucking mule. Oh, I'm using 3/4 stock. Okay, so 3/4 stock with the thickness of this. Okay, so so now the first thing you do, I had to raise this up because the blade, that 6-inch blade, will not clear. So I had to raise that up, the thickness of that piece of plywood. So you drop that blade down to where it's just a little bit less than half the thickness. All right. You can just eyeball it, and if you goof, we can start over again. So then you kind of line that up a little bit. And cut across the end. Now, well, that ain't gonna work. I didn't cut close enough to the end. Okay, so now you put these together, and as you can see, it won't slide over the top. So I have to lower this down a little bit. My saw is set up for one complete revolution of this crank down here. Well, the crank is down there, is a 1/16 of an inch. I need to go a little less than a 1/16, but I'm going to double that, so I can't. So I only need to go a 32nd. So I'm just going to go about a quarter turn and do it again. Now I'm going to see if, okay, it slides over the top, and I can lift that just, oh gosh, a hair. So I'm gonna go ahead and crank this up just a pinch and do it again. I don't want it to be overly tight, but at the same time, I don't want it to be too loose either. Okay, let's see how we did. Okay, it slides over, and that just, okay, I got just a little bit of slop there. I mean, yeah, it's maybe a thou. You can just feel it with your fingernail. So that's about what I want. So now the first thing you do to start making your cuts is you open this up. I'll hit the brake so I can stop the blade. Slip in the shim. Okay, the gauge block. Slip it in, the one that's already adjusted for the blade. Push it over snug, push this sliding part over snug against it. Tighten the wing nut. All right. Slide this over. Put this in. Make one cut through. All right. I like to use the brake. Stop the blade, loosen the wing nut, remove the shim, close it up where it's snug again, tighten. All right, then the piece that's going to lap over the top of this one, you put it in for a spacer. Slide this over to the spacer. All right. Yep, slide this over to the spacer. I don't like that. Well, we'll see how it's going to fit. This end was cut with a bandsaw, and it's not as perfect. Make your cross cut. Let the blade remove the spacer, and then cut out the remainder of the wood. That piece is done. 1/2 lap done. Now, we put the spacer back in. I should have done both pieces at the same time, but that's all right. We'll put the spacer back in. Close it up tight on the spacer. Snug, tight. Slide this over to the end of the gauge. Remove the spacer. Close this up tight. Lock it down with the screw. Install your spacer block. All right. Oop. Install your spacer block and cut. Remove your spacer block and remove the rest of the material. Now we should have a perfectly fitting half lap. Should be the proper depth and width. And that you can't get tighter than that, I don't think. Maybe you can. That's pretty dang tight. And remember, if it was too loose, you would make your wedge a little thicker. And if it's too tight, you make your wedge a little thinner. Now that is perfectly square. Perfectly square. But of course, you know that if you didn't have your radial arm saw properly tuned, that would not come out perfectly square. Now I've made that just a pinch deeper than it needs to be, so that there's a little bit of room for glue and squeeze out. So when you glue this up, you would just push it together, and now they're flush because they're sitting on a flush surface and they're the same thickness. So that's no sanding necessary to get those flush. That's a perfect joint. What could be simpler? Like I said, you can make these shims any width that you might need. Well, I hope this video was helpful. Maybe you learned something. And thank you very much for watching the video.